issues every Saturday starting at 10 a.m. and a repeat broadcast at 6 p.m. on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar. Also, don't miss our special monthly debate, which comes up every last Saturday of the month on trending political and governance issues in the sub-region. Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio. It's your time to speak.
Citizens Hour is evolving as the WADR's partnership with NET continues. This April, your NET Democracy and Governance program is going to the Sahel. We will focus on Mali, Burkina Faso.
Hello there, and thank you for joining us on this edition of Citizens Hour, your democratic citizens engaging and current affairs radio program. We are coming to you live on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar, and we're also streaming live online at WADR.org, YouTube, and Facebook. Citizens Hour comes to you live every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. here in Dakar and 11:30 a.m. in Abuja, Nigeria, bringing you more engaging conversation. I am Imo Edet here in Dakar, and of course I do have my colleague Usman Umar who will be joining me from Uyo, Akwa Ibom, Nigeria, much later on the program. All right, it's a pleasure to have you join us online and even here on radio, and we do have our studio already, guests seated here in the studio already. Now, today's program is loaded because we'll be looking at two very different but equally vital forms of security: physical security in the Sahel and digital security in Ghana. Now, first up, it takes us to Mali. Beyond the military headlines and political shifts, what is happening to the person on the street? We explore the devastating effects of insurgent attacks on the population, from displacement to the breakdown of basic livelihoods. Well, in our second half, we will turn to a story that has sent ripples through international development community. Ghana recently said no, thank you to a $109 million health deal from the U.S. The reason? Data privacy. And we are asking, is the protection of citizen data worth more than development aid? So stay tuned as we bring you all of this and more.
Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio. It's your time to speak.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us to be part of the conversation. You can drop a message in the comment section of our live streamings on YouTube and Facebook, and we will bring it on board here. Is Usman here now? Otherwise, we can continue. Well, let me quickly introduce our guest here in the studio joining us, and I usually think he's been here, but this is his first time in the studio. Dr. Oluwole Ojewale, he's the regional coordinator for Central Africa at the Institute for Security Studies here in Dakar. Dr. Ojewale, thank you so much for finding time to join us, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed. Well, joining us on the governance front, back in Abuja, Nigeria, we do have, and of course, a friend of the house, Mr. Austin Aigbe. He is the WADR's advocacy officer. Mr. Austin, thank you so much for finding time to join us there in Abuja, and welcome to the program. Okay, while we wait for Mr. Austin to respond, let me take on Dr. Jawale here in the studio. When we talk about insurgent attacks, I mean, it's often, this sounds like a distant conflict, but for a farmer in central Mali, this really isn't political, it's survival. Now, how has the nature of these attacks evolved to target the very social fabric of Malian communities?
Thank you so much for having me, Imo. Good morning to our guests throughout West Africa and other part of the world where people might be joining or watching this program. Why the central objective of terrorist groups, jihadists, can be sometimes political, particularly looking at a series of events that have taken place, whether it is in Central Sahel or even other part of the world, like what we have seen in the Middle East. Sometimes they frame the agenda to be political. But I think the man on the street, the rural farmers, the cross-border traders who are living on what I would describe as survivor economy have been the ones that have actually felt the brunt of this. In certain instances, we've also seen high-grade attack, if I could use that word, in terms of attack, strategic attack on military installation, military bases, even airports, critical infrastructure. When those experiences happen in the city, yes, most of the times they reverberate because of social media. People, even in far distant places, pick up those news. But if you look at available data on a regular basis in the Central Sahel and even the broader Lake Chad Basin, farmers are being kidnapped every day. There are a lot that don't make it to the news. And these are everyday peasants who actually experience this brunt. The implication is that their means of survival, the limited economy that they are running in those places, become the first casualty of that experience. And by extension, we also feel the impact in the centers because, to a large extent, urban food supply rely on what these farmers are producing in those places. Yeah. And that is the reason why your mango, your watermelon, and all this, everything is connected to everything. But I think, and that is why I must commend this kind of program, because this is an opportunity to talk about what affects the ordinary man in rural villages and towns, where the impact and the presence of the state is virtually absent or least felt, whether it is in education, health, and all this. So they run a survivor economy.
At what point does hope comes in? Because during the burial of the defense minister, the prime minister mentioned that the population should continue to be resilient, should continue to be hopeful. At what point, will all of this fade off?
Well, I think hope is a universal commodity, and it is the thread that connects us to the next day, hoping that we'll be alive, hoping that we'll be able to do all those things. I think that is what keeps those people alive. Hope is never in sight because hope is not a strategy. Yes, hope is not a strategy. Whatever the government says that people should keep, that is what they've been living by all their days. Yes. So rather than going to those places with rhetorics, which is usually characteristic of the initial knee-jerk government response to these things, government should rather invest in what will guarantee security for those people, working with them. Like I mentioned, hope is never a strategy, and it's like here that we breathe. I'm here in the studio now. I hope I will get home. I hope I will get to. Hope is never a strategy. True. Human beings live by hope on a daily basis. But you need a security response. You need a security strategy, which I think has been missing. And I do hope within our next few minutes we actually get into that, because the cross of this is that there's fire in your neighborhood. You can't fold your hands. It is high time they drop their political ideology of military authoritarianism versus democracy. ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel States must work together.
Indeed. I, as you mentioned, we'll be talking more about that. Let me cross over to Abuja and bring on board Mr. Austin Igwe. Mr. Austin, thank you again for joining us and being on the line. Beyond the headlines of coups and transition, how is this ongoing instability affecting governance and service delivery at the local level in Mali?
Thank you very much. I have to find, maybe the Malians don't understand what I'm going to say, so they have to take me away from the internet. That's an aside. All right. Yeah. But first of all, let me join the people of Mali to condole with the people and government over the death of the defense minister, and of course, several of the other military folks who were killed in this ongoing insurgent war. Worse off than what we see in Nigeria, even though Nigeria's own is also a bit of a colossal moment, but the Malian conflict is getting above any kind of statement, including my colleague talking about hope, the strategy. So, it's one of the greatest pain to development. People are not able to do what they like to do, including farming, petty trading. You can't literally do nothing because you fear for your life. As of 2 days ago, yesterday or so, where the insurgents has blocked access to Bamako, that you cannot get in, you cannot get out. Folks a family who went out of Bamako to somewhere, I think the northern part, is unable to return back. So that means that they are all stranded, inability to access even their own place of abode. And Maslow's theory of needs talked about the basic needs of life start with the psychological needs. If you cannot satisfy the psychological needs, you are unable to satisfy the social and, of course, security needs. So as of this moment, there is a psychological crisis in...
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Austin. Okay, I think network is playing some tricks on us. Well, let's come back here to the studio. Mr. Dr. Jawali, we are talking about the AES, and I know that in a previous interview with Ms. Austin, he talked about that the state of Mali, may be collapsing soon. How true is that?
Well, the indicators are there. And, there is an ideal failed state if it talks about collapsing soon. There is also the idea of failing state. A lot of countries that are going through these terrorist threats in the country are actually failing, including the big boys. And I don't want to really mention names because in the first instance, the moment government cannot assert authority, government cannot assert what they call monopoly of violence, then the state is fractured. So I am of the view that what remains of Mali from now is Bamako. And the military are going to sweat their blood out to defend that last bastion. Because if you look at Kidal, since 2023, it has been falling and regained. If you look at Segu and all these other parts of the country, there is no place that insurgents have not taken over some serious pocket of locations, strategic locations. So I think if the definition of collapse is that the Bamako is taking over, I don't see that soon. And I've written about these as well. As a scholar, it's also very important that you go back to what you've written and look at it critically again to know whether your assertions are completely true. I think what I've seen demonstrated, and I will give you an example. I'm conflict event location database. There's a map that I saw about 60-kilometer radius out of Ouagadougou. That is where you have relative safety. The same thing is also playing out in Bamako now. In fact, they've become so emboldened that they were even cutting Bamako away from supply chain, fuel, and all those things as we saw last year. So I think what remains now is that the country capital, for the purpose of regime protection, the military are not giving up on those places. And I also don't see the possibility we can see accelerated failure. I am not too sure that the ECOWAS states are going to allow a jihadist government in that region.
But why are they failing? Because I know this is part of what Austin was talking about. AES accepting help from ECOWAS. It could have been better than the 5,000 troops that they are putting together, which we haven't seen them perform in recent time.
Yes, they are failing because they fail to understand that 21st century security is built of multilateralism because it's like COVID-19 now. It doesn't seek visa to come to your country. terrorists are not going to seek visa to also enter your country. And if you see what the terrorists are doing now, the way they are replicating themselves, they've also now adapted this idea of cross-border
and even forming coalitions.
Yes, they follow coalitions. They are all over the places. Jinimha, House headquarters, cells in all these 3 countries, and they made their first lone attack in Nigeria, Kwara State, by killing a soldier last year, I think towards the tail end of last year. That is an expansionist agenda. Going back to your question, they are failing because they have failed to realize that we are stronger together in collective strength, not going it alone, because they don't want the big question to be confronting them, which is democracy.
Transition.
So, the collective army, the standby force that they've put together in terms of the AEL's charter, is as only strong as their respective national armies. If you don't have it, you can't produce it. So yes, I think it's a bold phase to make a statement, but what is truly needed is to work with all these other countries. And I'm going to give you an example. Apart from Nigeria, Benin, and Togo, every other country in the ECOWAS region is experiencing some relative peace. There's no internal security challenges. The implication of that is that there's a military asset that is seated in all these countries that can be deployed in terms of human and technological armament and all those things. So, in a nutshell, there is a vast resource available within ECOWAS. Of course, I know Nigeria contributes the largest troop, but aside that, there is a significant momentum that can be gathered in terms of what is available if they work with ECOWAS to stage a standby counter-terrorism force, and it is well funded. I think that is what they need now. And ECOWAS must not wait for them to act before they begin to act. Really.
We'll talk about how ECOWAS can jump in without being asked. But let's cross over to Abuja. Ms. Austin, are you back? And also Usman in Uyo. I hope both of you are back now. Usman, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
good
great.
morning.
Great to have you.
Dr. Joale, it's good to see you again.
Thank you so much. I'm in the studio.
Thank you very much.
Usman, please go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Joale, I'm very sure that this must have been discussed. But of course, from West Africa Democracy Radio, our concerns are always about the people. And from all that has been discussed, especially about the impacts of insurgency on the population. When we say the population, it gives this vague, understanding. But let's go specific to families. I mean, how we understand how in West Africa, people struggle to make ends meet, largely, especially agrarian communities where people get displaced, people get killed, and of course, this has its own impact on their ways of life, especially their means of earning a living. I would want you to just speak on, from your own point of view, specifically how this whole issue of crisis within the sub-region is impacting on particularly individual families and their abilities to be able to make ends meet on daily basis.
Very tough call, because the family is the lowest unit, the base of the society. And when a father cannot go to farm, I was speaking to a Malian here in Dakar, sometimes late last year, at the crux of that siege of Bamako, and she was narrating to me how the family has been completely cut off. Last week, Saturday, to be specific, here in Dakar, there is a woman, a very old woman, who came to see their relative, the sons to be specific, and can't go back to Bamako because of this crisis. In fact, these are just pockets of experiences. Every truck driver that cannot deliver goods to Bamako or bring goods out of Bamako to Senegal, to Ivory Coast and all these places, what it means is that the means of survival to a family is cut off. It means children might not be able to go to school. It means they might not be able to also pay or access basic services like Austin was talking about, basic need of life. Social condition become deteriorated. I read on one of the major headlines about a family, like Austin was mentioning, that, in fact, the headline is, we're going to go home now. People went just to step out and they could not return to their town. So this is a poly crisis in that is actually setting stage in which one problem leads to another, one problem leads to another. If children could not go to school, then they become cannon fodder or recruitment pool for terrorists in the coming days. So I believe largely, like we said earlier, that the family is the lowest base that is feeling this heat the most, and it's quite complicated in terms of what this might look like if you look at the scenario in the event that the state is unable to act, in the event that the help doesn't come on time, then it becomes a very strategic challenge that not only the family will have to deal with, but even the institutions of government, institutions of the society, religious, market, and all those other organs of the society.
All right, Usman. All right, let me cross over to Mr. Austin.
Mr. Austin.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Is Mr. Austin back with us?
Yes.
Mr. Austin.
For you.
Hello, Mr. Austin. Are you with us?
Hello.
Usman, go ahead. He can hear you. Please go ahead, Usman.
I can hardly hear Mr. Austin. Imo, I don't know if you can hear him.
Yes, we can hear him. Please go ahead, Usman.
Oh, okay. Okay, Mr. Austin, thank you very much. Of course, we are talking about the impact of insurgency on the Malian population. But of course, you are in Nigeria, and you also understand how communities, especially within the affected regions, particularly northeast, northwest, and even north central region of the country, have been grappling with the impact of attacks by armed groups under different names. From your own assessment, I would want you to just speak directly to how you think families are having to carry on despite these repeated attacks in the middle of repeated assurances by those entrusted with the task of providing protection for these communities in the first instance.
Well, I think grounded in very consciously. But just to add, is to provide security and welfare for citizens. After that, the government becomes irresponsible and non-existent. In today's Mali and of today, the insurgent in Nigeria, specifically, I said that the 72-hour ultimatum given to government to negotiate the relief over 400 plus cost of their invasion, we're going to be slaughtered. And today, the Nigerian government is not thinking about anything. The Nigerian government today is election. Anything outside election is irrelevant to the government of Nigeria. And that same thing with Mali. In Mali, when Omar was asking our colleague just now about that, I was saying that the government will collapse. They can keep holding on to Bamako. They are on their way to collapse. If Mali is already a failing state, it is a failed state. A government that cannot protect its citizens is worse off. You can still say Nigeria because it's only the northern part of Nigeria that had this huge challenge. Outside the northern part, elsewhere, southwest, southeast, and majority of part of Nigeria is still in a safer hand, not under any control of the insurgent group. So we can say that Nigeria is a bit safer when compared to Mali and Co. So if you take that as it were, you can say Nigeria is in a better state. But all due respect,
hello, Mr. Austin, could that be because of the size of Nigeria? Because I understand that there is a state in northern Nigeria that is as large as another country within the sub-region. So this safety that is relative, could it be because of the size of the country?
If you say the size, is Mali not bigger than Nigeria as in landmass? So population, maybe yes. The size, population, the expansion of population may have effect on it, but what is important is that the way the insurgents have captured virtually every part of Mali, it hasn't happened in Nigeria. I agree, Nigeria's population is more than Mali, but for landmass, you can't compare both. I've had the opportunity of traveling within Mali, from Bamako to Kai region at the border of Senegal. It's almost like traveling. It's almost close to more than 12 hours. More than 12 hours.
Well, Mr. Hassan, your network is really making it difficult to get this other point that you're making. But well said there. Let's cross over to the studio here as we take on Dr. Jawali. I mean, we're about talking about the AES and ECOWAS collaborating. Is there any possibility of that? Because I'm sure ECOWAS is also monitoring the situation in Mali and may be waiting for the AES to reach out. Would that work out, if at all they do?
Well, I think for the sake of the collective citizens of West Africa, there is a need for the military authoritarians in those three states to listen to the voice of reasoning. They've come to their wit end, except they don't want to accept. This is a military government being challenged. Because literally in this kind of environment, you don't need parliamentary approval to even take action. There are sufficient constraints in a democratic system. You can't just spend money or make procurement anyhow. They have that leeway. And if with all that available to them, the insurgents are running roughshod on them like this, they need to realize that they need international partner. Unfortunately, their major partner is unable to offer them much, which is Kremlin, Russia. So there is a need for them to really embrace the olive branch from ECOWAS. Yes, ECOWAS made some missteps in terms of the promise of military intervention in it, and they backtrack. They trace their steps back, and then at some point they say, okay, you know what? Let's continue to work together. And then they insisted that they were going to pull out. I think ECOWAS gave them about a year or so. To in fact, they were paying the salaries of their diplomats when they were not contributing. How far do you want this thing to go? More than that? Until they now realize that it looks like these people have stepped onto the journey of no return, that they now completely allow them to go. But we don't have to be friends to work together if we have a common enemy in the terrorist threats. So I think they need to find a way, and there are low-hanging fruits. Ghana still has relationship with Burkina Faso. Nigeria and Niger, even though things went bad, across the border is the same language. So there are all those building blocks that must still be built to be able to ensure that they work together. Ivory Coast has a relationship with Ouagadougou. Senegal, Mali have a very strong relationship. Prime Minister was there, and significant import to Mali is still going through Senegal. So I think it's plugging those holes and building on those infrastructure of relationship that is needed now. And for those guys to really see the need to work together with ECOWAS at this point, because they've demonized their established Western partners. Of course, that has its own political dimension, fine. But no matter what, the first person you need is your next neighbor. And those are the ECOWAS states. So I believe the possibility exists if they really want to explore those possibilities, like I've mentioned, at the wake of military coup in Niger. it was the Emir of Kano that went to meet. They met with the military junta, and so those infrastructure exist. Priming that infrastructure is what is urgently needed now, because these guys are fast advancing. Northern Benin, Northern Togo is in major crisis. Nigeria's borderline with Niger of 1,500 kilometer plus is completely broken down.
We had a question during the week from a listener, and this was when we were also talking about this Malian issue. And the listener was asking, how do these arms get to the hands of these terrorist groups? As a matter of fact, not just arms, but sophisticated arms that even the militaries in our sub-region can't acquire. How are they making it through the black market and being able to take on a full military of a country? Maybe you can share some insight on that for our listener.
So 2 points. One is the fact that the region experienced some of the most porous border issues in terms of a free flow of, don't forget that there is the protocol free movement of goods and persons within the region. So what that means is that, yes, of course, there's supposed to be intelligence surveillance that is weak across the region. So that fact of border porosity makes things to move freely and not really demonizing a particular trade now. There is also within that context in which people move goods, move animal, and I can tell you reliably from research that a lot of arms are moving within that context. River Niger from Futa Jalon to Nigeria has been a critical artery through which people follow through that route and then across the border. And we're feeling the pang of what happened in 2012, the fall of Gaddafi, which we're still feeling until now. That has been a major challenge. Another thing that I think is important for us to pay attention to is the sustained attack on military bases. Those attacks are not really to kill soldiers as it were. It is for armory theft, to loot the arms.
Okay.
And it is happening if you look at the kind of strategic attack that they've been carrying out on military bases in the recent time. If they succeed in overpowering the force, the next thing is to loot those arms. So those are critical areas through which arms are proliferating. And the third point will be the logistics. According to one African Union report, about 5,000. I want to repeat that one so that somebody don't go and quote me. 5,000 foreign fighters have returned to the Sahel. They came with logistics.
Foreign fighters from
Syria,
outside, okay.
All these places, all over the places, Yemen. They've returned to the Sahel, according to one African Union report. And they came with significant trainings and experiences in terms of logistics. It's interesting to know that the way the arms are being exchanged, it extends from the Sahel to Central Africa, in which they have the nodes through which they move all these things. And it speaks to the issues that we raised earlier about cross-border cooperation. If that is absent, movement of arms becomes a very easy thing.
Indeed. Usman, please come in here.
Dr. Ojole, I wanted to ask, because I'm glad you mentioned AU, because for much of the time when we talk about the issues within West African sub-region, the next person to always run to is ECOWAS. AU seems to be almost forgotten in every calculation, and one keeps wondering what actually has been the role of EU in all of these conversations, because you talked about the difficulty in ECOWAS getting to get Mali to the table and having to resort to their relationship with neighboring countries. But we still have AU, African Union, which one would have expected to be the next umbrella that should be able to, ensure this border cooperation in order for the individual countries to be able to stem the tide of this insecurity. I want you to just examine what AU has been doing. Is the union still effective as we speak?
So I'm persuaded that AU is doing something. Is what they are doing enough? Absolutely, the jury's out. Because if what they are doing is enough, then maybe we should have seen some level of transformation. I can't really recall, but I know that high-level AU visit to Mali or maybe one of those countries. I think I saw it recently. I believe it's part of the conversation. The challenge with what the AU can do is that AU has its own protocol in terms of engagement. If we're talking about multinational joint task force, it has to be authorized by the AU, like what we saw in the Lake Chad Basin. Countries can't just come together and then pull hands together and say we are going, and those things have their bureaucratic process before you receive the clearance. And even if you do that, if you're still convinced that the crisis is still lingering, you go back to the AU for renewal of the mandate. So I believe so strongly that maybe we are moving in that direction now. And what needs to be done is to work in partnership with the regional economic community. Yes, I believe the impact of the AU has not been felt. Maybe because AU as well is also a agglomeration of whatever is at the disposal of the countries involved, and AU also has a lot to fry now. There's crisis in Sudan, there's crisis in Mozambique, there's crisis in Eastern DRC. South Sudan has been some form of maybe what I would describe as graveyard peace. And then you have this conflagration in the Sahel. So I think like the proverbs of one of the African, they say, if there is a log that falls on the other, you cut the one on the top before you move to the next. So we have this crisis now in which AU has been stretched lean. And don't forget that to be able to put something together, you can't shave the head of somebody if the person is not present.
Let me hold you there and perhaps take on Mr. Austin on this issue of the AU coming in and efforts by ECOWAS in resolving the issues and helping out in Mali. Mr. Austin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, my brother. We have talked about this before. I have said that it is time that ECOWAS move in. ECOWAS should avoid even securing any form of approval from the Malian government. Move in, go support the people of Mali, clear out or support the clearing out of this insurgent group, and then get the support of citizens. Because part of what we are headed towards is ECOWAS of the people. The people need to see ECOWAS as relevant. The people need to see ECOWAS as important to their livelihood or important to them as an individual, as family, as we have talked about how the insurgent is impacting on families. If ECOWAS becomes strategic and is able to clear out or support in clearing out these militia group, I tell you, the people will resist all forms of African core. They will resist anything that looks like the Wagner group. They will support ECOWAS and begin to call for democracy. But as of this time, I think ECOWAS is still maintaining its form of, the Sahel state is supreme, the supremacy of state, the military regime need to call them. At this time, I don't think that ECOWAS need those calls. ECOWAS should move in.
But Mr. Austin, by law, can ECOWAS actually carry out such an action?
When you say by law, in fact, this is part of the crisis of development. If people are under attack and they've got an elder brother, even though I agree with you that they've already pulled out from ECOWAS, I agree too that the Sahel state have about 5,000 strong military standby force that has not been able to provide support in Mali. I agree that, yes, they stand up to the African core, that Wagner is providing support. But today, all of those are falling. And one of the reasons that citizens in the Sahel state are not bothered about the role of ECOWAS is because they don't see ECOWAS as relevant to their livelihood. They don't see ECOWAS maintaining anything, any form of support to them. In fact, if you ask a typical West African, whether it's even Nigeria, they'll tell you what's the relevance of ECOWAS. Does ECOWAS really have any impact on our lives? We've had this conversation before where we talked about ECOWAS giving money, resources, I think to the tune of, is it about 5 million, I can't remember the amount now, to countries, including Nigeria, Togo, and all the other states to fight insurgency. And
Today, those Sahel states were not part of it. I think there should be an extraordinary meeting led by the, if possible, if okay, maybe let me say by way of diplomacy, since you are talking about diplomacy, by way of diplomacy, it is time for ECOWAS to reach out now to the president of Mali.
Would they accept ECOWAS, Mr. Austin? I mean, if they do that, knowing the fact that they see ECOWAS as a very strong enemy, would they even accept the olive branch?
That is why I'm saying that there is even no need for diplomacy. As of this time, the Malian authority does not recognize anything like diplomacy. They talk about supremacy. They talk about the supremacy of states, that they are in charge. Now you are in charge. There's no problem about it. Niger has not come to your aid. Burkina Faso has not come to your aid. Burkina Faso is also protecting their own area so that the spillover from Mali does not continue with the kind of challenge that Burkina Faso is going through today. You recall that it was in the STARCON report that talked about Burkina Faso maintaining number 1 in terms of terrorism index. So Burkina Faso is still on the high side. Mali may take over from Burkina Faso as we are beginning to look at it now. I am saying that because of the peoples of West Africa, not necessarily because of the military head, ECOWAS, as it continues to drive towards ECOWAS of the people, there is need to support the people. Because the question that I can, my summary of this whole conversation is, how do families, individuals survive this militia attack? And I think it is about time that ECOWAS makes itself relevant. Move in and clear them. If African core is unable to do the job, if ECOWAS can do it, I am telling you, would have won Mali to ECOWAS fold and gradually begin to win them gradually. But in any case, we always talk about diplomacy. Who diplomacy help?
All right.
That's a typical Nigerian question anyway.
Well, Dr. Jawale, as we round off this conversation, what's in for the people of Mali in the next, because we know one city is still under captive by the insurgents. What's the hope for them in the coming days?
So the hope for them in the coming days, hope is not a strategy like I mentioned earlier. I think what is important now for the people of Mali is to come to the realization that these guys cannot help them.
Who the military cannot help them? They
cannot help them. There is a need for that realization. They've sold everything that they have in the docket to them. They've sold anti-French sentiment that can only go as far as it has gone. They've also demonized ECOWAS. It can only go as far as it has gone. They need to realize now that the conversation should be, how do we call for help within our immediate environment? And they have to leverage everything that is at their disposal, because I also know that there is wanton human rights abuses. Yeah. The kind of conversation that we're holding in Dakar now, a few persons who probably attempted that are missing in those countries now. So it's very, very important for the people to rise and leverage external infrastructure that is available in media, civil society. Reach out to say, we need help now.
That's a revolution.
Well, maybe not in the true sense, in the general sense of it. Not really to topple the government. Nobody wants the place to be without government. I'm very sure nobody wants that to happen. But the truth of the matter is that the government is least felt now. Is not present in vast territories of the land. Sovereignty is completely fractured in that place now. So with that, there's a need, and there are examples to borrow. See what happened in Senegal. They mobilized the diaspora community during the days of political turmoil and all those things. That is the kind of example that I'm talking about. See what I'm not saying people should be on the streets, really. Yeah. What I am saying is that internet is cut off, Twitter, radio, you can't talk. Then find a means to communicate to your external allies and the diaspora to begin to talk about this thing. The Mali, Burkina Faso in particular, are facing existential challenge that there is no need for anybody to fold their hands again.
Mr. Austin, your final thought on this as we wrap up this session. Mr. Austin, your last thought on this. Can you hear me? Okay, I think we're having audio issues.
I think Mr. Austin's network is still very
but his video is on. All right. I think that's the much.
Maybe you need. Okay.
Yeah, that may be the much we can take on this. We already have our other panel members joined already. We want to thank you so much, Dr. Jawali, for finding time to join us in the studio. We really appreciate your time, and we thank you also for giving us your weekend.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, thank you so much for having me.
All right, we also want to thank Mr. Austin Igbe there, though the network has been ups and down, but we're able to get a few comments from him. Thank you so much for your time and for being a part of the program. Well, in case you're just tuning in, this is Citizens Hour, and we will be right back to bring on board our guests for the second part of the show. Stay with us. All right, if you're just tuning in or streaming on YouTube and Facebook, this is Citizens Hour, and we are coming to you live on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar. We have been examining the human cause of conflict in Mali. Usman.
Yes, and in the second half of the program, as Imo has already indicated, definitely we will be taking on something very, very, very important. I mean, Imo, I want to believe that this is about the first time I'm hearing an African country saying no to something as oily as we are having it in Ghana. But in an era where data is the new oil, Ghana has taken a stand that many find surprising, rejecting a massive U.S. wealth deal rather, to protect its citizens' digital sovereignty. Imo.
Well, to help us dissect this, we're joined by Dr. Dixon Adomako Kisi, former MP for Anya Soutum, and Mr. Kwame Sapong Asiedu, Democracy and Development Fellow at CDD Ghana. Gentlemen, thank you so much for finding time to join us on the program, and welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I would like to start with you, Mr. Asiedu. I mean, turning down $109 million in health support is no small decision. I mean, what immediate and long-term impact could this have on healthcare delivery in Ghana?
Well, thank you. And I'd want to say good morning to Dixon as well. If you say immediate impact, we need to roll back a bit. This decision hasn't just happened in vacuum. If we all remember, following Trump's second coming to government, the USAID was suspended. In fact, it was broken down. To say suspended is an understatement. It was broken down. And countries across Africa lost all the grants that were coming through from USAID. At that time, Ghana was getting about, let's say, between $140 million and $160 million a year. It came to about $1.4 billion based on the exchange rate from USAID for what we call health-related programs. And what do I mean by that? Vaccinations, HIV management, tuberculosis, and other development assistance. So that went. When that went, not just in Ghana, but across the sub-region, it went for all countries. Countries had to look within their budgets to find money to fund these programs, which Ghana, like any other country, did, because you couldn't stop vaccination and all that. So when that was done, in September of last year, on the 5th of September to be precise, the United States came out with a document called the Africa First Health Strategy, in which they stated categorically that hitherto their health investments or health contributions to countries in, say, Africa and Southeast Asia, in fact, development partners generally, had gone waste. And they didn't see whatever benefit it accrued to the United States. And therefore, they were going to put a new policy in place that simply put America first. So that was the starting point. They had said, what we've done ever since the Second World War has gone waste. We haven't benefited, and we are going to put America first. In the meantime, like I said, countries were finding ways of plugging that hole. So come 2025, around November, they then come to countries with what they call a bilateral memorandum of understanding, which set out how America was going to contribute to the health sectors of this. And for a country like Ghana, we were promised $109 million over 5 years, which came to about $26 million a year over 5 years. But to get that, you needed to give a counterpart funding of about 70 million. And also, you needed to give certain guarantees, one of which included access to your health data for a period of 25 years.
That's a long time.
But more importantly, over that period, the United States government had the right to share that data with third parties, pharmaceutical companies, research institutions. And you had no right to say no. That was number one. Number two, if any research was done, and as a result, any novel drugs came and patents came, you had no right to claim part of the patent requirements that accrued. But more importantly, if then those patents were used to develop drugs, you had no first choice to the medicines. Neither did you have any guaranteed concessionary prices. But because the United States FDA had licensed these products, your local FDA could not put impediments and say that they needed a local license before they distributed it on the ground. Let me end this way.
Okay.
What that meant is that in a country like Ghana, which has a health expenditure per capita of $234 per person per year currently, the United States was prepared to give us 75 cents per person per year to mortgage our health data, our bio data, our access to patents, our access to any profits that accrued from drug development for 75 cents. The question is, was that parity? And lastly, they said that document was a bilateral agreement. Bilateral agreements require reciprocity. What does that mean? Whatever I give you, you give something in return.
Yes.
So the question African countries should be asking themselves is, if they are guaranteeing the United States access to their health data for 25 years, is the United States going to give them access to United States health data for another 25 years? When that question was asked, the United States said, no, their health data is bound by national security constraints.
Indeed.
The question then to ask for African countries to ask is our health data not bound by national security constraints as well? That should be situated. But
all right. Let me hold your thought there.
Let me end this way.
Okay.
When you talk about a bilateral agreement, it means both parties wrote it. When countries like Ghana then said, let's form a technical working group to restructure this agreement or memorandum of understanding because it seems too lopsided in favor of the United States. The United States said, no, it's either take it or leave it. And that is where we find ourselves now. Thank you.
Quite interesting. Now, some countries are treating this strategy with suspicion, and we've seen countries like Zimbabwe in February rejected a similar proposal, and then they went to Zambia, and that was stalled by the court because they were demanding access to mineral rights and data. And then, of course, Kenya was the third one, and the Supreme Court in Kenya had to suspend that deal over the same concerns of personal data which we're talking about. Let me throw this question to Dr. Kisi now. Are we saying that African countries are becoming more assertive in terms of digital rights and a sign of a broader shift across the continent?
First of all, I would stand to be correct. The assertiveness is relative, but it's in a good direction. It's in a good direction, and I would also start from the current Secretary of Health for the U.S. and how troubling that is, because I think that even within the Americas, clearly many of their new policies are not even favorable for their own Americans, let alone we in Africa. So I'm not entirely surprised by the refusal, because invariably this is somebody who's not so much for science. And the hesitation and resistance in even the science community in America begs the question that, what can he bring to us that we will agree to? And I must say that I'm happy that government.
Oh dear. I think the network of Dr. Kisi has frozen.
I think network has done its own again. With Dr.
Refusing. And yeah, I'm here.
Oh, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Okay,
Yes.
please go ahead.
Yeah, I was yeah. So I'm very much in support, and I think that we should be more assertive. There are many other things that requires that we tailor things more African, and that I can go on and on about many things that when they come, they demand from us that they don't demand from their healthcare practitioners. So this is good. It's a very good start. Granted, there are many other things that we need to become more self-reliant, so that our dependence on foreign aid or grants for our healthcare should be reduced.
Indeed. Just follow up before. Okay, Usman, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to go back to Mr. Kwame because I read a report last night where someone was very critical of this new trend of big techs, especially big American tech companies, using the governments of their countries to they provide funding that will be used as aids to African countries in exchange for data. And it's a good thing, like Dr. Kisi said, that Africans, especially African governments, are now becoming more assertive in rejecting these offers. But Mr. Kwame, I want to ask, is this worth it? Because looking at the amount of money involved and the specific infrastructure they say this amount will provide, is it worth it to let go in exchange for sharing health data of citizens?
Okay, thanks. Let me answer it this way. I ended by answering this question, but I'll reiterate and then I'll go to individualization of care. So I said Ghana's health expenditure per capita is now $234 per person per year. So that is what Ghana is spending on each citizen each year to collect this data. And someone wants to give you 75 cents, not even $1, per person per year to have 25 years access. And he's not even giving it to you for 25 years. He's giving it to you for 5 years to have access to this data. So you can see how disproportionate the cost of obtaining the data is compared with the cost of access that they want to give. If I was in a decision-making position, I would never sign a document. Okay, let me park that. The second thing, and I am a researcher in the pharma space. I know Dr. Adumaku Kisi has worked in the United States and is well clued on his medicine. So he has a good understanding of where medicine is going now with what we call individualization of care. And what do I mean by individualization of care? In the past, let's use malaria because that's what every African knows. When you had malaria, everyone would be prescribed chloroquine. And people would itch, and some even would not itch. But those who would itch, some are given antihistamines like antizin and Piriton, and the itching will stop, and others, the itching would not stop. Why was this happening? It was because of our genetic makeup and our enzyme makeup and how drugs are broken down in our body. Some are broken down through our liver, some are broken down through our kidneys, some are broken down through an enzyme mechanism called the cytochrome P450. I don't want to get very technical. But what it means is that different human beings have different capabilities in their liver, in their kidneys, and in their enzyme pathways. And therefore, some would itch because of their breakdown mechanism and the byproducts that they produce, and some would not itch because they don't produce that byproduct. So science has moved to another level where they are saying, Kwame and Dixon can both be diagnosed with hypertension. They might have the same blood pressure threshold at the point of diagnosis, but Kwame might be put on amlodipine and Dixon might be put on losartan or lisinopril because based on their lab tests and everything and their enzyme levels, they realize that Dr. Adimaku Kisi would do better on lisinopril and Kwame would do better on amlodipine. And therefore, even though our diagnosis parameters are the same, we will be put on different medicines. Why is this happening? Because now there's a lot of research, especially in the United States and the Southeast Asian continent, India and China, about the genetic makeup of human beings. Unfortunately, that data only includes 3% of total African data. And even when you talk of it as African data, it's a bit disingenuous because a lot of the blacks that have gone into this research have come from the countries of the West, like the United States, like the UK, where I'm currently, the European Union countries, etc., etc. So they do not have native African genetic makeup information. What does that mean? What that means is that with Africa having a very low median age, that means we have a young population. The median age in Africa is between 19 and 23 years, depending on which country and data you're looking at. And our disease burden virtually doubling. What does that mean? It means chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes are happening at a much lower age and are overlapping with the infectious diseases like malaria, typhoid, dysentery that we already have. Our pharmaceutical and healthcare market is becoming increasingly lucrative. Why? Because the middle class is increasing and disproportionately. These chronic diseases are in the middle class and they have purchasing power. But because they do not have a good understanding of what you call our genetic makeup, they need to get access to our medical data, our health data, to be able to do research, to invent new drugs or repurpose some of these drugs. What do I mean by repurpose? So you, for example, realize I talked about lisinopril. The parent drug of that was what we call enalapril. And many others have come depending on different genetic makeups, which gives specific advantage. So they'll repurpose these drugs to be able to sell to the African market. Now they are telling you, give them your data, give them your health information for them to do all this work and get those drugs and come and sell it to you at a higher price for very next to nothing payments for 5 years.
This is almost like what we see in the pouches of cocoa. I mean, they buy cocoa, refined cocoa, and bring chocolate for us.
Exactly. And the likes of myself and Dr. Adimaku, who sat in classrooms in UK, United States, Canada, and went to school with them, we're not exactly the worst students. Often we were the best students.
Well,
how do they?
Yes, sorry, let me hold you there. Let me hold you there.
No, let me finish this way. How do they turn around and use people we sat in class and were better off than to come and give us these conditions and expect us to sign on to? That is the question African countries need to be asking themselves. And that is why maybe because a lot of us are now becoming very vocal, we are agreeing and say we need to push back a lot.
Then how do Dr. Kisi, this is for you. I mean, how will then the Ghanaian government pay for this rejection, looking at the need for critical health infrastructure, low manpower, low purchase of medicine and all of that? How are they going to pay for this? Dr. Kisi, this is for you. Please unmute.
Yeah, I've done it. Let me say that based on my experience with in this country, it comes down to our priorities. If we really prioritize appropriately, there's more than enough resources, I think, within the country. I can cite the fact that monies earmarked for health are not entirely all used for health in this country and in many other African countries. So if what is earmarked for health is actually attributed largely and pushed for health, many of us will do better. And I really think that more and more, I'm convinced that we need to tailor our healthcare to our needs and for that matter to our genetics. And I agree with him, especially with regards to these brokerages. For all you know, instead of relying on African scientists, they entirely, take out the need to depend on indigenous medical doctors in this country for the pharmaceutical research work, which actually is the chunk of revenue, or as it is, helping the human capital within the country, which then is like, as it is, ripping the soil out of the nation and then go do all the testing outside and then bring us all kinds of things. So these are portions of our brokerage in the future where we need to encourage homegrown scientific work and as it is, the use of the human capital we have in Africa. And if not at all, the Ghanaians who are, as it is, very well endowed with the necessary accreditations in both the Americas and Europe, who can be used as part of the pharmaceutical research work. But when they come to Africa, come for our data and do not still wish to even use African pharmacists or African origin doctors to do the research, then it begs the question, that you are even perpetuating some of these unfortunate.
Okay. Another trick by the network here on Dr. Kisi.
Unfortunately, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I think that certainly African countries are well resourced. If they try hard, they'll find funding to support many of these health programs.
In other words, this is the time to start promoting our own research, funding our own research, making sure we produce our own medicines. Dr. Kiss, is that what you're saying?
It's in line with what I'm saying, and also even making demands, from the Sanofis, the many pharmaceutical companies, Johnson & Johnson, who, as it is, renege on improving the human capital in Africa, for lack of a better word. And I like the fact that he's made it clear to all of us that we sit in class with them, we perform very well. So in terms of the human capacity, and we can do if they give us the opportunity. So this is in line with the awakening in Africa, and I would encourage more expatriates to get involved in African research, and as it is, look back home, and redirect, funded and resources to, research about our own people, and even medications that are, as it is, plant-based, which our forefathers were using in our own jurisdiction. I sit on a very interesting work with Nimtree now, and I'm surprised that people are paying so much for other things that, Nimtree can handle. So, we have so much we need to do as Africans.
Usman. Okay, so I would like to cross over to Mr. Siedu.
Okay.
Usman, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. All right. Thank you very much, Imo. I want to ask Mr. Kwame, because beyond the legalities and all the concerns, there is a human element to all of this. Assuming without conceding, as they say in law, if this deal had gone through, would the average Ghanaian patient feel comfortable knowing that their health data was being shared intentionally in exchange for better hospital facilities and other benefits that would have come with this deal?
Well, thank you. You see, one thing we have to understand, and why some of us are getting very vocal about it, is that health is a very technical. Anytime I have to talk about health, I see it as a very technical area. But health is also what is called, in public policy, a public service good, which means that traditionally, even when you look at budgets across Africa, health has been looked at as a spending center. What do I mean by that? It spends money, but it doesn't generate money. And every time you see across the sub-region, like Dr. Adumaku Kisi was a former MP, he was on the Health Select Committee, and he knows that every time they are fighting for that, because it is seen that you take and you don't give. But the truth of the matter is health disease burden is also a raw material like gold, like silver, like diamond, like manganese, like plutonium. Because in there lies a country's health geography. What do I mean by health geography? So what's your prevalence rate? How many people, if you take every 100 people, how many have hypertension? How many have diabetes? How many have coronary heart disease? How many have malaria? If you take any 100 people, how many would die in every given year? Your mortality rate. If you take every 1,000 women who give birth, how many of them would die at birth? How many of the children would die? Infant mortality within the first 2 years and the 5 mortality within the 5. All those sit within that data. That is a gold mine when it comes to data. And that would generate a lot more money than 25 million in 1 year or 109 million in 5 years. The problem is that African countries haven't seen their disease burden as a human resource. They've seen it as a drain on their economy. What the Americans are telling us is, look, you cannot see your human resources. We can see it. We can see that we can do research with our pharma industry. We can see we can get patents. We can see we can get medicines. We can see we can come and sell it. And where have they gotten this from? They've gotten it from our own behavior in Africa, where a lot of African countries, they package their disease burden into generic medicines. Go to countries like India and Pakistan. They then manufacture our generic medicines for our countries, generate jobs in their country, build up businesses in their country, employ their citizens, and come and sell it. That model of healthcare must be broken by Africans because it's antiquated. Like Dr. Aduma Kikisi was saying, we have enough scientists in Africa now who can, because these medicines are already generic and they run about 90 to 95% of our disease burden, especially with chronic disease, who can research in our universities. If you take Ghana, you have Cape Coast, you have Legon, you have Tech, which have good medical schools, which have good pharmacy schools, which have world-class researchers who can do this work and start doing the production of these generic medicines locally and use AFTA and the fact that there are high-end regulatory authorities like Ghana's FDA, which is a level 3 regulatory authority by WHO standard, to sell across the African continent. And when I say things like this, people say, oh, you are being very, very ambitious. And I tell them, look, 10 years ago, Algeria manufactured only 27% of its pharmaceutical needs. As at this year, when the African Medicines Agency visited them, they are manufacturing 82%. Wow. Bangladesh, 10 years ago, was manufacturing 30%. Now they manufacture 98% of their generic pharmaceutical medicines and are exporting to countries like Ghana and Senegal. Again, we sat in the same classrooms with these people. They don't have God-given intellect that God never gave us. It's just that we haven't been intentional. And now that we are putting things like AFTA in place, we have serious pharmaceutical industries. We've seen what happened in South Africa, where their pharmaceutical companies breached patent rights at the height of COVID, at the height of HIV to produce generic HIV medicines, which brought down the cost of HIV medication and now converts HIV from an infectious disease now to what is seen as a chronic disease. You live with it, you take your medicines, and even your viral load can become non-detectable and you live a normal life. Should tell us that if we put our minds at it, we can do it. And what I am saying and how I'll conclude this is, the American First document, everyone should go and pick it and read it. You would realize how much they think we are naive. And then when you look at these country examples I've given, some in Southeast Asia and some in Africa like Algeria and South Africa, you realize that it is about time that we collaborate. Ethiopia now is on the right track. They have moved from about 23% and are about 39% of their pharmaceutical needs, thanks to building large pharmaceutical parks with the aid of China. We all must go down this route. That is what the Americans are scared of, and that is what we need to speak up. So if the average African, or for that matter, the average Ghanaian thinks the short term taking 75 cents or $26 million a year is the way to go, I say no. The way to go is to try and use our health disease burden as a resource, screen our people early to identify the chronic diseases before they come into our hospitals, know our disease burdens properly, manufacture for them, across the sub-region, if we think we do not have the pooled populations, and across the West African sub-region, we can have centers of excellence in the manufacture of some of these drugs. Maybe in Dakar. In Dakar, for example, you have the Pasteur Institute, which is one of the world's top research institutions. When it was being built, we were told that it was never going to work. Today, a lot of the research that we use globally is coming out of Pasteur. That should tell us something.
Indeed. Well spoken there. Dr. Kisi, is it possible in this part of the climb that we run governance without seeking for international aid?
Well, I think that the world as it is mostly interdependence. And I think that we didn't start off well in terms of how our royalties are managed. We didn't start off well with very good structuring of some of our mineral earth and how it is used. So these are the deficits we have as Africa. But invariably, even America depends on China for a huge amount of funding. So this idea of not depending on another country or other countries shouldn't be even broken. So the key thing is that who do we intend to do business with? Are we doing Russian business? Are we doing Chinese business or Indian business? And these things are some of the key questions that need to be thought about. From a financial standpoint, as it stands now, in many of the African countries, when it comes to technology or in terms of telecommunication, they are more aligned to maybe India. When it comes to healthcare, it's India and Asian pharmaceuticals. So these are sort of the things that will drive which direction that people go. So I think that the interdependence cannot change. And we need to just negotiate, one, some of our mineral royalties, two, either we refine things in country, process more things within our own countries, and kudos to the likes of Nigeria, who now can refine things in their country. Africa needs to do what we rely on others to do for us. But as to how we fund, that also needs very advanced men who understand financing. And I think that these days we need to go to the table with well-endowed, very knowledgeable people so that we can broker and walk away with very good deals for Africa. And that is where we are getting. At least there are many more African descendants who've been to Harvard. I'm just using that as an example, Oxford and all these other institutions. And we excel when we go there. So we also need to encourage them to join in the fray when it comes to policy analysis and direction. And I like the fact that Ajay says that they think we're naive. I think that it is rather a demonstration of their ignorance of the depth and width of knowledge that Africans have. The average American or British is usually very myopic compared to some of the African descendants who are already born knowing that there's Spain, there's Italy, we Africans usually are very, outward looking and looking out to the rest of the world. While the average hillbilly or American is so focused on his small area. So I think that, the American First policy, rather, for me, shows the lack of depth of understanding of the likes of, President Donald Trump and his policy or henchmen. And for that matter, I think that I'll use this platform to encourage many scientific people out there and knowledgeable architects and all kinds of knowledgeable Africans to as it is, lend the African nations their mind and knowledge. When it comes to the legal spectrum, I've always cried that in Ghana, though we have minerals, we don't have very astute mineral judges or mineral-related lawyers or judges who can appreciate environmental protection issues to take on conglomerates like, big oil companies and things like that. So I'm praying that as we move on, when we go to the table with the Americans, we have American-trained Africans sitting in and negotiating for the best interest of Africans. These are my hopes.
All right. I think a lot of people align with your hope, Dr. Kisi. But let me go over to Mr. Kwame. Critics have argued that if Ghana rejects tech-backed aid, then it must have a robust homegrown digital infrastructure to fill the void. As it is today, does Ghana have the technical and financial capability to build a self-sufficient national health database without, of course, these international mega deals? Mr. Kwame.
Well, thanks. You see, this is the thing, and that's why I agree with Dr. Ademoku Kisi to a large extent. Every time Africa has looked at short-term solutions, first and foremost, do we have the local tech know-how? Like we said, and like Dr. Ademoku Kisi has said earlier, we went to the same Harvards, Oxfords, Cambridges. We sat in the same classroom, basically. So yes, we have the know-how. What we have not done is what the Americans, or for that matter, the Chinese, more importantly, have done. Being patient with our local entrepreneurs to build and grow with the countries. What do I mean by that? When you go to the United States or you come to the UK or you go to Europe, the central data exchange for health is all that is owned by the state. Just as you do with telecommunications, where the central, in Ghana, we call it the National Communications Authority, or with mobile money, the Bank of Ghana own the central data point so that they can collect the information. That's all they build. They then license operators like MTN, like Telecel. In the UK, you have Pharmacy Manager, you have NextPhase, to plug in and sell to the, to the hospitals, to the pharmacies, and even to the wholesalers, so that they can plug in and provide it. What does that do? It creates another allied health pathway for job creation. Often we are saying, no, we shouldn't do that because we are not ready yet. And we go and, like Dr. Ademoku Kisi was saying, we go and give it to some Indian to build it. The IT guys are sitting in India. They are paying taxes to India. And we say our economies are not growing. Why don't we are training so many people in our universities in IT, computer engineering, you name it. Why don't we empower them to build and grow with us and manage them? Like the example that was given with Dangote in Nigeria. Dangote hasn't just dropped from outer space. He looked at the market and started talking. I've watched a lot of his things on YouTube as to why Nigeria was producing so much oil and refining them. I have looked at the data across Africa, and I've also asked myself, why is it that Africa, with a lot of cultivatable land, is importing starch to do its local manufacture? And importing starch from countries like the UK, potato starch from countries like the UK, when we can grow cassava. And everyone who has done a bit of pharmaceutical manufacturing knows that the best pharmaceutical starch, whether it's a glidant, it's a bulking agent, is cassava starch because it doesn't contain gluten. And everyone across the world is looking for gluten-free starch. Why should we be importing from Brazil? Why should we be importing from Nigeria? We need to create the ecosystem and say, yes, like Dr. Ademoku Kisi says, we cannot cut ourselves off. We'll still import from Brazil, but we have a sunset clause. We are going to grow the local entrepreneur to be able to grow cassava, produce starch, refine it to pharmaceutical grade, and use it to service the pharmaceutical markets across. I'd say we're giving ourselves 10 years, like the Singapore, like the Bangladesh.
I think we have started.
So the answer is now we don't have it, but we can build it. Okay. India has done it, China has done it, and they are no different from us. And we just need to have the mentality that we can and we want.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Kisi, your final thought on this and what's going to be coming up in the coming days as regards this aid?
very hopeful that.
Oh, well, Dr. Kisi, your network is.
Government will
again.
need to use the opportunity. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you now, please. Go ahead.
Hear me? Yes. And I think that we need to, as it is, make the Americans fully aware that we want fair and equitable, programs, not a program that would come and take all of our data and utilize it only into their best interest. So I'm very happy about the path that we're taking. And I encourage many more African countries to look at how we're doing our work in Ghana. Yeah.
All right, that's the much we can take on this discussion. We want to thank our guest, Dr. Dixon Adomaki Kisi, there in Ghana, and Mr. Kwame Sapong Asiedu, Democracy and Development Fellow at CDD Ghana. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of the program.
Thank you.
Indeed, thank you so much.
Well, on this edition, we have examined the survival of the Malian people amidst insurgency and the high-stakes world of data diplomacy in Ghana. Usman.
And that's the much we can take on this edition of the program. Citizens are on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal. You can find this broadcast and indeed others that we have aired before on our website, WADR.org, and on all our streaming platforms. Thank you for listening and join us next week. I am Usman Umar. Thank you for your time.
And I am Imo Edet. Many thanks to our technical and production team. Coming up next is our midday news. Goodbye.